Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a doctor, a lawyer, and a coach from Nottingham, UK, Dr. Adam Harrison. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Thanks so much for having me. I'm the privileged one, honestly. I'm really
No,
appreciate
we're
it.
honored to have that. You had to have you.
Thank you.
As I mentioned, Dr. Harrison is a family physician. He's a lawyer and he's a leadership coach. Very seldom do we see a doctor and a lawyer combination in any one individual. So, Adam, today we'll speak about coaching, and we'll speak a little bit about your other area of interest, which is workplace bullying. Let me start by asking you, how has your incredible background supported your coaching philosophy, your style, and your values?
Gosh, okay. Well, yeah, it's not that incredible. There are quite a few doctor lawyers around actually when you start looking. But my background actually is fairly humble. I come from a very working class background. We were fairly poor when I was growing up, but I was encouraged to work hard. And I was the first in the family to go to university, and obviously medicine was my first degree. And then I became very interested in the medical legal aspects and the legal aspects of medicine. So I pursued that, and it was one of one of the various roles that I had along my career. About 16 years after graduating as a doctor, I was in a medical leadership role, and I had some coaching myself. I had some leadership coaching, and it was then that I was first exposed to the concept of values, of your values, and actually kind of putting words onto what your internal moral compass is telling you. And so my values are honesty, justice, gratitude, love, and humor. And really my in terms of my style and my coaching philosophy, it's very much guided by my values. Since I've had this sort of epiphany and learning about my values, my life really has been guided by those.
Wow.
And so when I've been in the workplace and in difficult personal circumstances, I've always kind of gone back to my values and thought, how can I manage this situation? But I very much coach with gratitude, love, and humor and honesty. So
Amazing.
yeah.
Amazing. And you mentioned, that you became a doctor, then you got interested in the medical legal aspects of medicine. From being a family physician to a lawyer, what took you to becoming a coach?
I as I said before, I was in a medical leadership role when I was offered some leadership coaching. And for me, that was, it's not an understatement. It sounds a bit cheesy, but it's not an understatement to say it was transformational for me. It just made me look at everything through a different lens. And I just thought, wow, if this is the impact it is having on me personally, what kind of an impact can I have on others if I kind of did this? And it was a few years after having had that coaching that I went into coaching, but I was given the opportunity when we moved to Australia for my wife's fellowship, and I wasn't working clinically. And I thought, well, now's a great opportunity to train to be a coach. So yeah, that's what I did.
Terrific. And given again your background, what are some of the unique perspectives that you bring? You already told me about your values, but what are the unique perspectives you bring to a coaching relationship?
So, I have this long, fairly checkered career history, although it kind of makes sense when you look into it in detail. But I'm a doctor, I'm a medical educator, and I'm still a medical educator, even though I'm not kind of working in formal academic circles. I educate doctors all the time on things. I'm a former medical director. As you said, I'm a qualified lawyer. I'm a certified life leadership and executive coach. I am a husband to a female surgeon. She's a woman of color. She's actually a Muslim British Pakistani woman. I'm a father to two young girls who just turned 6 and are almost 9. So I have all those aspects of my professional and personal life that I can bring to the table. So, I don't see the separation. If people come along and they want some career coaching or something from me, I can talk at length about my career transitions and so on. But I will also want to know about their personal and private lives and how that's relevant. So I bring my medical side to the table, which other doctor clients quite like. They know that they're getting someone who understands, who's been through all of those awful on-call rotas and seen some terrible things that we're exposed to. And the other facets of my career as well, people, it appeals to different people, so I have a lot to offer, I think.
Absolutely. And 4 decades ago, when I started working for British American Tobacco in India, the whole concept of mentoring and coaching was either by a family elder or by someone senior in your company who took a liking for you. What has changed in the world of coaching that people are now willing to take professionals as their coaches?
That's a great question. I think a lot of what you're describing from elders, either as parents or as line managers and seniors in your work role, is really mentoring and people guiding you through the experiences that they've had. And coaching is something that really comes out of the sports world. And it started in the US and then, kind of evolved into, life coaching and coaching for people with personal goals. And, then obviously in the States, these things just kind of take off and they evolve. They capture the imagination, and in the US, people are all about kind of like personal development, and if I work hard, it's America's a land of opportunity, I can achieve anything.
Correct.
And so really, I think it really kind of captured the zeitgeist in the US, and of course when things start in the US, they tend to spread across the world. So it's a very mature kind of model in the US, and has all sorts of different specialisms, business coaching, health coaching, leadership coaching, relationship coaching, all of these things. Anything you can pretty much do in counseling, I think now you can do in coaching,
very interesting,
but with a completely different angle.
Correct.
And then of course it's spread across the world, is fairly mature in the UK. I'd say we're still probably 10 or 20 years behind the US, but it's getting there. And again, Australia is behind the UK as far as I can tell. But yeah, it's spreading kind of eastward from the States, if you like.
Very interesting. And when you are working with your coachees across age groups, what are your perspectives on how the young leaders who are now coming into senior roles as millennials and Gen Zs, how is it different to coach them as compared to the older leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So I mean, from a personal perspective, my oldest client was in his mid-60s. He was a very senior anaesthetist, senior medical leader. And my youngest current client is in her mid to late 20s. She's just kind of early on in her postgraduate surgical training, about to do her exam. So my clients span all the generations.
Okay.
I mean, I do find the whole Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z differentiation generally a bit strange for me. I don't. It's not an exact science, and doctors like things that are very evidence-based, and it's also, I think, sometimes it's used in a bit of a pejorative way. Some people will say, oh, millennials, and they'll kind of like say something, derogatory about. So I think it can be a bit divisive. So
Correct.
I find differences in coaching people of different generations really just down to the traits of that person, their own personalities and their values. I mean, there are really lovely 70-year-olds and there are really lovely 20-year-olds, aren't there? But there are very unkind and unpleasant people of both of those ages as well, right? So I just take people as they are. I don't put a label on them as to what generation they are. It's if we have a good rapport, whatever their age, gender, or ethnicity. That's it. That's good enough for me.
Fascinating. So one more question. Again, the UK is a very, very multicultural country, and you yourself have someone from another country who is part of your life. As a coach, do you see any impact that culture makes on coaching?
I do, but I don't have a huge amount of experience in this because I've coached in the UK, I've coached in Australia, I've coached in New Zealand. I have clients who are from the USA and Canada. But I've never coached anywhere a bit more interesting, like South America or Africa or India or China or anything like that. I have coached some international medical graduates, so from India, who are doctors who work in the UK, and they've embraced the coaching paradigm fine, but then they are naturalized to the UK now, so that may be a bit different. I just think, again, it depends on the cultural or societal openness to the coaching, and going back to what I said before, I think the USA, I love coaching Americans because they're so motivated, and they're so into it, and they really believe in it, in the concept, and they make great clients. They hit their goals. And in the UK, there's a certain amount of suspicion still and cynicism about it. Some people in some quarters see it as a bit woo-woo, and that's just two cultures divided by the Atlantic. So I think there must be quite marked cultural differences.
Well said. So Adam, now let's move to the other part, which you seem to have done a lot of work on, which is in the area of workplace bullying. How do you define workplace bullying in today's context?
Thanks for bringing this up, Ashutosh. I have some notes I wanted to read from because I didn't want to kind of like not get it accurate, So there's a couple of definitions. One is the UK one, and one is an American one. So in the UK, it's defined as repeated behavior that's intended to cause harm. And is unwanted by the recipient. That's not actually a legal definition because there is no illegality in bullying in the UK. I think we're going to talk a little bit later on about legislation, and there is for certain people in the UK, but not in a general way. In the US, there's a very big institute called the US Institute of Workplace Bullying that was founded by doctors Ruth and Gary Namey, who are both workplace psychologists. And that's the preeminent place in the States, really. And they describe it as repeated health-harming mistreatment by one or more employees of an employer or an organization. And they say it's abusive conduct that's either verbal abuse or behaviors which are threatening, intimidating, or humiliating, or work sabotage, so undermining someone's work, for example, or a combination of that. So it can be all of the but I think the key thing there, really, that always kind of touches me is the health harming aspect of it that they describe in the US, because it very much can be.
Wow. And based on all the work that you have done in this area, is there a certain profile of a bully that you can watch out for?
That's a good question. It's difficult to answer. I think it depends where you live in the world. For a start. So in the Western world, in the US and the UK and Australia, even though it's not geographically west, if you know what I mean. But there's a stereotype of the white middle-aged man. And that is an accurate stereotype. But obviously it's going to be different in places like India and China. Having said that, I think that people of every ethnicity, every age, and every gender can be a bully because the reasons that people become bullies are not really geographically specific. They're more to do with what has happened in their past, you know, their childhood trauma and things like that. And I don't know if you want to go into that, but certainly, you know, it's possible for someone in India and China and the US to have a father who was a bully, and that they learned how to behave from that bullying father. It's not specific to, you know, which country they live in, I think.
Amazing. And you were talking about what causes the person to become a bully. Do talk a little bit about that also.
Yeah, okay. I'll try and keep it quick. I've got 5 kind of short points. So there's a really good speaker and author called Kristen Geese in the US. I recommend people look at her TEDx talk, and she talks about hurt people.
Wow.
So that's pretty obvious. You know, it's kind of the cycle repeating itself. If that's your norm, that you've been hurt, then it's normal for you to hurt people. So that's the first one. The other is modeling, that I've kind of already alluded to. So modeling on role models. So in medicine, for example, you know, a junior doctor will look at an attending or a consultant and think, I want to become them. I want to get to that kind of like that stage of my career. And to get to that stage, to become like them, I need to behave like them.
Okay.
And if they have been a bully, then that's how some people, you know, kind of like learn, become workplace bullies. Third one, I would say, is insecurity. So just basically feeling threatened, and then, you know, kind of lashing out against people. Fourth one would be a low or a lack of emotional intelligence. So, and I think for me, yes, self-awareness and empathy are key, but emotional regulation is really important. If you can't regulate your emotions and keep your emotions in check, and you fly off the handle and shout at people all the time, then, you know, that's going to lead to you being perceived as a bully. And then finally, which is actually a problem of the people who are bullied, who are the targets, there's low self-confidence and low self-esteem. You know, so people who experience that can go one way or the other. They can become a bully or they can become the victim.
Wow.
You know,
very interesting. Great points. Absolutely interesting.
Thank you.
And based on the work that you have done and all your readings, is workplace bullying similar across genders?
Across genders, in terms of we've talked about the profile of the bully, so it's more likely to be a man who is the bully. It's more likely to be a woman who is the victim.
Okay.
It actually gets quite nuanced, because, you know, there are all sorts of other demographics that come into play as well. You know, so, you know, if you were the highest risk person really would be a woman who is a woman of color, who may be a lesbian with a disability, an obvious disability, you know, because these are all risk factors in themselves, you know. So
amazing. And is there any legislation that exists in some countries? I know there is nothing. I'm reasonably certain there's nothing in India. But is there any legislation for workplace bullying, and what is the recourse?
So I'm going to put my legal hat on here and also make a few assumptions. So I think I can speak quite with some sort of you know, kind of clarity about the UK, because I think I said that workplace bullying in its sort of simplest form, if you like, say an able-bodied straight white man bullying another able-bodied straight white man would not be deemed as illegal. But if you were bullying someone with what we call a protected characteristic under the Equality Act, there's this piece of legislation called the Equality Act from 2010 in the UK, which protects people, you know, on the grounds of age, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, disability. if you are doing the same thing against someone with one of those characteristics, then you can be prosecuted for harassment under the Equality Act and the Protection from Harassment Act. So that's really where it comes in the UK. I think in certain states in the US, and again, they have different things in different states there. You can. But yeah, you make a good point. It's the law hasn't really caught up with it yet, I don't think, generally speaking, across the world. You would probably have to mount some sort of a civil action because it's probably not deemed a criminal act unless there's actual physical abuse, kind of contact made and so on, then it would be a criminal thing. But yeah, you'd probably have to mount some kind of civil action against either the perpetrator or the employer.
I agree. Well said. So, Adam, I've got time for one more question. And this is for the many people who will listen to our conversation, both in video format and audio. Based on your vast experience across multiple areas of excellence, specialization, you worked across multiple countries. What would you say are 3 lessons that you would like our viewers and listeners to take away from your experience and from our conversation?
Thank you, Ashutosh. So, firstly, for me, family and friends is the most important thing. So I would say, firstly, spend as much time with your loved ones as possible. No one's epitaph, as far as I know, ever read, "I wish I'd spent more time at work."
Absolutely.
So that would be my first and probably most important one. Secondly, kindness. Being a kind person and a kind leader. So be a kind person and a kind leader. There's this great quote I came across recently when I did a talk about the benefits of kindness in the workplace by a rabbi called Harold Kushner. And it says, do things for people, not because of who they are or what they will do for you in return, but because of who you are.
Correct.
So I love that. So, and I would just say, just to tack onto that further to just generally being kind person and kindly, be kind to yourself. Treat yourself as you would treat your best friend.
Correct.
So many of us, I did in this talk I just mentioned, I did a show of hands who here, is unkind to themselves, berates themselves. Half the room's hands went up, we're all so quick to be unkind to ourselves.
Correct.
And then finally, live, love, and lead by your values, and always try to do work in alignment with your values. And as I mentioned, mine are honesty, justice, gratitude, love, and humor. And I do try and live and lead by those values. And I find that if I'm offered some kind of work and it just doesn't feel right to me, and it's not in alignment with those values, it's going to trigger me down the pathway some way. It's going to trigger me. So it's best to try and avoid that if you can.
Fabulous. And on that note, I want to say thank you for speaking to me. Thank you for 3 amazing lessons, which is the most important one that I think everyone should understand, is spend time with your loved ones as much as you can. And I often tell people, spend time with parents and children, because both will grow up and go away. So that is very, very important what you said. Second, again, very critical, which is on kindness. And the third one is live, love, and lead, which again is something which is a very, very important takeaway for all of us. Thank you again for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.